What's going on YouTube? This is Amani from Team Off-West. I'm here to give you the tips and tricks video. This is volume 2. This one, by popular request, is going to be on Gohan, who I myself am kind of surprised I haven't done his tips and tricks video yet, but this one will be more adjusted towards the set 2 release and the draft pack promo, so the decks are going to come out a little different. As it turns out, I actually have 3 different builds here. I have a blue-green, I have a red-green, and then I have a blue, red, and green that I'll go over real quickly and just show you the differences between them. Of course, as always, I'm going to make sure that you get all of the different angles so that you'll know if there's something you want to change or if there's something that's too expensive. Apparently, green seems to have the most expensive 4-drop lineup in the game now all of a sudden. So anything that like that, I'll go over the alternatives so that you can just kind of free ball it your way. But mostly, we're going to go into the topic of how the decks work. Alright, so we'll start off with the leader, Gohan. And obviously, for those who don't know, Gohan says that when he attacks, if you have more life than your opponent, you draw a card. That's all he does. On the other side, if he attacks, you draw a card automatically. And if you ever make it to 6 energy, you can tap 6 energy and then KO all of your opponent's battle cards. Now, I think that Gohan still holds a pretty strong spot in the format right now because most of the bigger decks right now have to deal damage to their life in order for them to work efficiently. Self-awakening seems to be like a really crucial thing right now. So Gohan takes advantage of those decks by being able to draw consistently while keeping your life total higher in the event that you are forced to fight against your opponent and he is accelerating his card advantage and you're trying to keep up with a leader who in normal circumstances wouldn't draw on his unawakened side. Gohan counters that offset and lets you keep your hand up with your opponent as much as you can by drawing on both sides, start of the game actually. For that reason, his life total is generally better off being higher, and so your matchups generally end up playing out a little slower, a little more defensive. However, with the builds that I currently have in the format that we're in, I feel like it's much faster and it's necessary to kind of keep the speed of the game a little bit faster because some of these decks really prey on slower matchups and really take advantage, like Cell in particular, or Mecha Frieza. The more time you give them, the more they out-resource you in a situation where they normally wouldn't. So I don't want the games to drag on too far. So for this build, I'm going to go over them in drops, one at a time. I'm going to start with the red, green, blue build, which I think is the strongest one I've come up with so far. So starting with the drops, we have the opening 8 defensive cards. These are actually the only blue cards in the deck. The Whis' Courage and the Senzu Bean and the 1 Goten that you search with the Mighty Mask so that you can always have the blue available to you and not have to charge any of your defensive cards. The beauty in these particular cards, as blue always has, is that with a single untapped blue energy, all 8 of these cards are potentially playable. And they're all defensive cards, though Senzu Bean can be used offensively as well. I use them primarily for defense, since they'll just about be the only defensive cards in the deck. As a matter of fact, these are the only extra cards in the deck at all. So it's really important that if you can get the 1 Goten either through the Mighty Mask or drawing it in your opening hand, I usually keep it in my opening hand. If I don't have a Mighty Mask in my opening hand, I would rather not risk sending it back into the deck and then it turns out to be a life and I have to charge one of the defense cards. So if I get it in my opening hand, I'll keep it. If not, unfortunately, I'll just use Mighty Mask to pull it out, which I'm hoping to be the 2-drop. If Mighty Mask is your 2-drop, your curve is solid. Otherwise, you're probably kind of falling behind. Going into that, Kaba is the actual 1-drop that you want to open up with, and now Kaba going second is more important. Going first, I generally charge and pass, but going second, I generally like to open Kaba because Kaba forces your opponent into an awkward position playing with Gohan, because it'll start by taking the first life, even if you're playing against a matchup where your opponent has not taken any damage on his first turn. Kaba will force the opponent's life total down to 6 if they let him go through, which immediately lets your Gohan start drawing cards from that point forward. And then because of the nature of Kaba, Kaba has to be focused because he has to be removed off the board. You just can't leave him there after the first turn. And so that keeps the pressure off of Gohan immediately by warranting a response towards Kaba. And that generally tends to be one of your opponent's 1 energy cards, but in the event that you have the space and advantage, you could easily just keep your Kaba alive, or even at best your opponent will break even on life total, and then you can just hit him next turn with the rest of your drops going into your Mighty Mass play, and you hit him with that and then use your Mighty Mass, etc. He's a hard card to block on the first turn because of the amount of advantage you lose trying to stop him versus the amount of advantage you lose not stopping him. It's the lesser of 2 evils to just let him deal the damage to you if you haven't taken any damage already. Of course, if you're at 4 life on turn 1, you probably want to do something about it. But then it doesn't matter if he goes through or not because I'm still going to draw cards. So he does his job very well, and he's the only card that you can summon on turn 1. So you generally want to keep him in your opening hands, and it already gets the red mana into your energy area so that you can play the Mighty Mass next turn, and you can charge a different color if you need to. The 4 Trunks, obviously, those are staples. The 4 Mighty Masks here, and then while we're at it, these are your other Mighty Mass targets. So these are all your targets here. And now the success of your early into mid transition really is determined by whether or not you hit this Mighty Mass correctly. Not hitting the Mighty Mass just means that you don't have to worry about whether or not you do it correctly. Hitting the Mighty Mass means that you do want to make sure you do it correctly. Of course, if this is still in the deck, this is your first Goten target, and that will make this your Trunks target. That's important because you're going to need them in the graveyard at some point so that you can use the Vegito in the late game. It's not important for it to happen right away. You can take your time with it, but you do want to get them in the grave sooner than later so it becomes live as soon as it can. Generally, pulling these Trunkses out of the deck sooner kind of put them at risk in matchups against like Cell and things that attack your hand, because then they just become stuck to your hand and you have to discard down to 3 if Cell activates his effect, and you don't want to have to choose between how many 10Ks you're going to keep versus how many other cards you're going to keep. Most of the time those cards are necessary. So I always search for these first and get these out of the way, get that into the energy area, and get that into the discard pile. And then from there, if I pull another Mighty Mass, then it searches for the red Goten, it's the only Goten left, and then the green Trunks. And from there, you're just searching green Trunks from there forward. If you actually resolve Mighty Mass more than 3 times in a game, you will notice that you don't have any more Goten targets. And I don't know, maybe you opened all 4 of them or something, but you're having a really incredible game if you resolve 4 Mighty Masks in a frame of time where actually running out of Gotens hurts you, because by then you should have pulled all your Trunks out of the deck as well. Who knows? Games go kind of strange sometimes, but if that happens, that's incredible. So going into that, and then your mid-game transitions into the Gotenks and the Gohans here. Now, the Gohan is the other part of the Here to Save the Day Vegito combo, this Vegito right here. And so if you go through to the end of the deck, you will notice that these are the only Adolescent Gohans I play in this version. I don't play the Miraculous Comeback Gohan. I'll get into that a little later. But that makes this Gohan important to land sometime early in the game. He does apply a lot of pressure, but if you can drop him, you do. But if you notice, he costs 2 reds. So it's not important if you drop him or not. You just need to get him out of the deck, while the Gotenks becomes an important drop for the pressure that he applies. Now, both of them can apply pressure, so it's not as if Gohan is the only 3-drop you have, you're in a bad spot. By no means, because he does apply a tremendous amount of pressure. He does let you draw some cards if you're falling behind on your hand size, but the double strike really does press your opponent out. However, the Gotenks is probably still the more important play towards the mid-game, because it starts to deny your opponent resources in a situation where his transition becomes very important and reliant on cards in their hand. And then I have 3 Champas. And I keep the Champas because I like having Champa in my deck in this format, because it gives me the power to close out games from 2 life or from 3 life or something like that. It applies a different amount of pressure from just my leader, and it takes the pressure off of me having to spend my resources into playing a character, getting a character through the prevalent number of counters in the format, and being able to attack with it, and then comboing in Champa, and then having the energy left to actually sustain a strong enough combo where it feels possible to kill my opponent. And Champa is one of the few 10Ks that I have. I have 10 of them total in this build, and he will count for 3 of them. So I like to keep him there for the early and the mid and the late game looming threat that anything can double strike. So if you're at 2 life, just about anything can be lethal, and it forces my opponent to take unnecessary blocks and unnecessary safe precautions where I probably wouldn't be able to kill him if he didn't anyway. Also, that really fuels my my mid-game transition when I go into my 4 drops, which would be this Gohan and this Kale, and then these Vegetos. Now, I don't usually get this Vegito out on 4. I don't actually see a need for it to hit the board on 4. It just costs you all your energy, and if you can actually resolve its effect on 4, you're probably in a really awkward spot because you have to have 4 cards in your hand. That's not a lot of cards, and going up to 6 probably is not going to save you, unless you're unawakened or something, or you're recovering from a cell. Some unique situation makes him the better play, but usually these are your better 4 drops or 5 drops, or continue from there. Kale's a beast. This is one of the few decks that I only play 3 Kales in. I want you to know that. But she's a very powerful card. Both of them are critical in the removals. Kale is for the board. Gohan is for the targeted removal. She regenerates resources, and both of them combo very well with Champa for double strike criticals, but they apply pressure in the mid game because they're criticals. They're cards that can't be ignored. Never mind all the rest of the stuff that Kale does or what Gohan does, but they can't be ignored when they're summoned, and they apply the type of pressure that you need to have moving through the mid into the late game. And then the Vegetos are 4 drops, but they're usually played later in the game when you're trying to get a finishing push, and your opponent denies you a finishing push, and so you've drained most of your resources, and he recovers those resources to help you to get an additional finishing push where you normally wouldn't have one available. The last 4 cards are Gotenks, Super Saiyan Gotenks. I picked the green Gotenks over the red Gotenks because just like Vegito, playing the red Gotenks puts you in a really awkward spot. In some cases, it's not necessary for your tokens to have double strike, and so having 9 or 10 cards in your hand is not an offset to you because it's still 4 attacks. But I'm tapped out if I play them on 5. All of the Gotenks and the tokens are inherently weaker than this Gotenks. They don't net you any more hand advantage, and they're not inherent double strikers. You have to work to make them double strikers, and you have to put yourself in a bad spot if you need them all to be double strikes. Then, as a whole, they can all be blocked by a well-timed Senzu Beam. And then after that, they can all be cleared by a well-commissioned Kale. It's just, they're as a package, a high risk, not as high of a reward type of card. I prefer the safe option of the green Gotenks. He comes into play. He only costs you 3 of the 5 manas you had to tap. He replaces himself in the hand. He's double strike. He's stronger. He demands immediate response. So he serves the same role, but he's better. And he doesn't cost 3 of his color. The 5-drop red Gotenks cost 3 reds. I'm not committing 3 reds to him, not ever. So it's just a better drop to me. So that's the initial, that's the blue, red, green list. And so this one is more of a pressure. It's like a tempo list. At any time you find yourself controlling the pace of the game, you're regenerating the resources that you're putting out. If you need to deal more damage, if you need to make a harder defense, you're regenerating those resources through your Gohan. But this is not a heavy late game deck. Obviously, Gotenks, Kale, Vegito, they serve as efficient finishers. Very strong late game cards. But this deck doesn't have a very high energy curve, and you don't have any boom super strong finishing cards in here. So don't look to be turn 7, turn 8 charging expecting a miracle out of it. You're still gonna have the same 5-drop be your biggest card. So let's not try to drag the game out too much with it if you can help it, because you're gonna burn out eventually. That's the standard blue-green list. Now switching it out into the blue-green list when it does not have the red in it, it's a simple card difference. So These stay. These go. That stays. And then she goes up to 4 in this list. And she becomes more important because the control matchup then becomes the more important part of the fight. He stays, obviously. And then you get your mid-game changes. You get 3 TNs in this list now because you're going to play a slower game and you're going to want self-awakening. It's going to be more important. You're not trading damage for damage. Your goal here is to keep control of the board, slowly generate more presence on the board, pull out more threats, and take the game at a slow pace, poke for damage until you can set up for a finish. So it's going to be more important that you have control over your awakening in this deck versus the other one, and TN helps to solidify that while simultaneously being, albeit a costly, but still a 10k boost that summons himself to the board. Then towards your mid game, I chose to take a more aggressive approach. I have played Blue-Green Gohan in Control before, but I think it's a little too slow for this format. So I took a different approach. So I went with the critical Goku and the critical Vegeta here, and 4 is a piece. And of course, we still keep the 3 Champas, those go, and the 4 Gotenks. And so I'm really heavily focused on the mid game here in this point because this is where the majority of your damage is going to come from in this build. When you're making that transition towards the late game, all of your critical pokes, your resource denials through your Gotenks, your Vegetas, your Kales, those are going to be very important to making sure that it doesn't cost you that you're running out of late game. So your opponent may be able to generate some stronger threats on board. He may even be able to outtrade you in removals. But it's not going to save him if it's costing him cards that he's not regenerating while you are able to regenerate, because you're both drawing a card a turn from your leader, but you're losing. He's losing in the life count when you're poking him down with critical, and he's not returning that favor. You're gaining cards and he's losing cards, and when you go towards the later phase of the game, those 2 or 3 cards you're picking up is going to make the difference. And blue has always been, I think, the best color in sustaining throughout the game when it comes to whether or not you have the tools to survive through a hard push or make a hard push. The early game changes just slightly here. The Mighty Mass combo is not present in this deck because you don't have enough red. It's just that simple. So all of those come out, the Kava comes out, and then those are replaced with the draw package of the 2-drop Goku and the 1-drop Majin Buu. Because if it ain't Buu, it ain't blue. Truthfully. Those are just your early game curves so that you can keep your hand up to par as much as you can. With Coercion, Senzu Bean. This deck becomes a little more efficient in this format because, as I was saying earlier, this format, most of the stronger decks are built in Self-Awakenings, so they're going to take damage to accelerate their play. It's just not wise for them to not take the damage just so that they can keep your Gohan from drawing cards. It just can't matter that much to them. So when you're opening a Buu into a Goku or something like that, you don't have to worry about applying extra pressure because they're probably going to do the work for you in the most case. If they don't, then that's fine. You can just work your way into the mid game and poke with the crits. You're not putting out any extra cards, so you don't have to worry about drawing too much that early in the game. He shouldn't be accelerating, so you don't have to worry if you're not accelerating. And I have one FSK in here, Father Son Kamehameha, because I like it as a cheap alternative to a removal in the format when your opponent is curving correctly, or mostly in the Cell and the Android matchups. It's not as though I couldn't drop Gohan and remove Cell. The problem is that Cell comes out on 3, and if it goes first and he strips my hand down to 3 cards, I don't have a real good response to it. I'm probably going to strip down to my negate and maybe a 10k if I have it or something, and my hand's just going to be really awkward. So I can recover from it, and I can pull the Cell off the board maybe the next turn, but I need to remove the first Cell first so that if they go into a second one, because I don't see how else they're going to finish you off, I'll actually be able to use one of my more upfront removes, like the Gohan, for example, to take that one off the board. I can't put it all into Gohan because once I go down to 3 cards, if I'm just getting into my 4th energy, I'll tap out to remove it, and I only have 2 or 3 cards left to defend myself with. It's a bad situation. So I did put the 1 in there specifically for that, but if it turns out that it removes a card that was just played on curve, then great. It only costs 1. And that's the blue-green list. For anyone that's interested in the red-green list, it's just a 9-card swap out of the red, blue, green list, and it adds in these cards. So I add in the 2 FSKs in here because once you go to the red-green list, you lose all of your ability to remove Cell from the board. So I play the 2 Fatherless and Kamehameha just to give some sort of chance. It's not really a really dead card, but it does come up to be a dead card sometimes. But it's a necessary evil. Like if Cell hits the board, you have to try to attack through him with 3 cards in your hand, or you're gonna lose. There's no other way to remove him. Like there's no hard removal in this one. Literally outside of these, and you're gonna lose if you have to draw your Gohan to take Cell off the board and make your 2. It's a bad spot. It's always gonna be a bad spot. You don't want to be in that bad spot. So, those still 4 of those. Still ends with those. You don't play those anymore. 4 of him. 4 of those. Champa still made the cut somehow. And then the red engine goes back in, but it changes. Now you have 4 Goten, because now it becomes even more space available to play it, and it's your only target, and resolving multiple Mighty Masks here really does help speed the deck up quite a bit. You're down to 1 red Trunks now, and 4 of the green Trunks, because unlike in the other one, you have 3 TNs in this one, so your Awakening is in your control, and that obviously means that you have the room to use your 10k Trunkses and still get them into the discard pile if you need to pull Vegeta off earlier. You also get these cards back, but you get the 4 Miraculous Gohans in here, and I play those in here too because this one's a little heavier on your 10k boost, so now you have 3, 7, 11, 14, 17. And I don't like the number. I don't like the number. But the Gohan alongside the Vegeta, what it is, helps you to recover in the matchups that are really stripping you of resources, because you are probably going to burn your resources out a lot quicker in this one. You're going to be putting a lot more pressure, so you're going to be comboing more, you're going to be throwing more cards out, and the Gohan does become live a lot more often in this build than in the other ones. Speaking of which, the last 4 cards are Videl. And Videl would be an example of one of those cards that is only in this build that literally burns more cards out of your hand just by being in there, doing her job. She's a free blocker. She comes straight out of your hand when you draw most of the time onto the board to -1. So it does help to fuel Ultimate Gohan. It does help to fuel Vegeta. I still won't play the red Gotenks, however. I won't do it. Still won't do it. So there you have it. And they mesh very well, all 3 of the builds, whichever one you want to use. If you prefer to take a skeleton of one and then go a different direction, you're free to do so. In my opinion, as I was saying again, I think that the red, blue, green version was the strongest. It just gives you a good myriad of offensive and defensive options. Speaking of which, these are probably amongst the most expensive cards in this game right now. So if you can't find your way into getting some of these particular cards, you can replace them. This one is really hard to replace, the Vegeta. If you can't get a hold of the Vegeta, my suggestion would be not to try to play the Mighty Mask engine as hard as it is, because it's not a necessary card in there, but he's very, very strong in that slot. And he's pretty much the whole reason you go out of the way to use the Mighty Mask engine the way that it's being used, where you actually need like these. Because otherwise you could just search the green Trunks and just pick a Goten and just add a 5k to your hand, and that would be fine. Then you could cut those. So if you don't have them, keep your Trunkses, and if you still want to play the red-green, keep the Mighty Masks and all of that. But your best replacement for this would probably be somewhere in a 3-drop somewhere, or 2-drop. I wouldn't consider replacing this with a 10k and then throwing your mana cost off in your combo phase, because he really does help to be a free combo. With Kale, I guess Bardock would probably be your closest replacement. He's still a free boost. He's still a 20k on board. He still kills some of the board. He doesn't do much of anything else, and he's only a single striker. But he's probably your most cost-efficient replacement for Kale. And with Gohan, he's the easier one to replace. You can replace it with like Furious Yell, Raging Attacker, Vegeta's replace them. You trade the critical for double strike. Of course, Raging Attacker's targets are limited to 4 drops, and Furious Yell costs you life. But you just, if you can't get them, you can't get them. But you're probably not gonna find a stronger card. So this is definitely the strongest version. But those are your replacements if you can. Don't try to replace the 3-drop Gohan if you can help it. Just try to get them. If you're gonna use the Vegito, just try to get the Gohan. If you can't use the Gohan, you can't get the Gohan, the Vegito, just cut that engine out completely and replace it with whatever else. But don't try to play it without them, because it's gonna be hard. And the Miraculous Gohan does not replace the ability Gohan, in no way. All the rest of the cards are pretty straightforward. They're not really expensive. If you can't get them, try to get them, because they don't really have great replacements. Versus the early game, maybe, but towards the late game, it's pretty straightforward. The Gotenks, for example, here, don't replace it with the red Gotenks. Replace it with either of the 5-drop androids work, Android 17 or Android 18. But they don't provide the same type of utility. So try to consider that when you're making your replacements, that the utility in the card is what you're looking for, and you don't get the effects that you have in other cards. That's why you pick these cards. So that'll do it. If you have any questions or anything, you're free to hit me up, leave a comment, like and sub, and have fun.